Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. Going to be doing something a little bit different and interesting here. We're going to be breaking up this episode, or this point in time anyway, into two different parts. This will be the first part coming after the player exit interview day. RJ, you were there basically all day today, hearing from all of the players. Tomorrow, of course, will be Coach Dave Haxtell and General Manager Ron Francis and all of that. So we'll be covering and doing part two to all of this tomorrow. On today's section, we're going to, of course, be covering those player exit interviews, but we're also going to be talking about the series wrap up. We're going to be talking about the Dallas series because it's over. The Kraken lost in Game 7. We haven't been able to record since then because I've been traveling. I'm still sick, all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and start with that, RJ, before we move on to the player stuff. Kraken take Dallas to 7. You know, I mean, it's been said a billion times by now, right? Everybody would have taken this result at the beginning of the season. If you said the Kraken were going to go to a Game 7 in the second round, would you be okay with that? We all would have been like, hell yeah, let's go. And you know what? It was that exciting. And it was a ton of fun. What this Kraken team was able to do. It was an incredible way for them to finish the year and to really, as many people on the team, around the team, Coach Haxtell said, I mean, just establish themselves in the NHL, establish themselves in Seattle, do all of that impressive stuff.
Right, and the Kraken gained a lot of respect with this playoff run, exceeding everybody's expectations, and even to the very end, I thought it was after Game 5. We both kind of felt like there was a chance that it was over and the Stars had kind of had the Kraken figured out, but a really gutsy Game 6 effort at home to win, to force it to Dallas for a Game 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you go down in 2-1 in a close Game 7, even though, you get outplayed quite a bit. Philip Grubauer with a fantastic performance, but really this was a team that just fought and fought and fought until the very end.
Yep. We'll obviously continue to talk all off season about what a success this season was for the Kraken, but let's go ahead and do a little bit of a post-mortem on the series itself, RJ, because the bottom line was what cost the Kraken this series was just their inability to defeat the Stars defense when Jani Hakanpää was not in the lineup. It's the bottom line, right? Like, that's what lost them the series.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so tough getting through those layers of defense that Dallas has. And yeah, that Lindell Hakanpää pairing was nice. You can take advantage of that, but they're not on the ice all the time. And Miro Heiskanen, in fact, is on the ice probably at least half the time. So that presents another challenge as well for the Kraken. And I think you saw that in Game 5 and Game 7, those two pivotal games where the Stars were able to kind of shut things down with a lead in the third period. And the Kraken just couldn't really claw their way back. In Game 7, they're just trying to tie this game and chase it. And they only get really 3 shots on goal until the final little stretch there as they're making their last minute push. So just not good enough in that respect. And I think, that was kind of a struggle for them.
It was definitely a struggle for them, just trying to crack that defense, try to get inside on Jake Ottinger, right? Like, this is how you were able to chase Jake Ottinger twice. It was a big story, especially around the Dallas Stars media groups. Those 2 games I was there, just how much Jake Ottinger struggled in that series. That is not something that any of them were used to seeing. Like, it was definitely something that was, I won't say shaking them because it's not like they're the team, but it was something that they were just like, wow, like, this is new. How do we cover this kind of thing, right? And the bottom line is the Kraken were able to do a really good job in those other games of getting pressure in front of him, confusing him, getting there for rebound chances, being able to, pass from right in front of him so he's already committed to a certain angle and then get something going on a separate side. That's what they were able to do in Game 6 very effectively. And then just Game 7 looked a lot like Game 5, where it was just taking shots from the perimeter and nobody can get inside and nobody can kind of do anything. And the one thing about it that was odd for me is that, this is what the Stars did to rally for Games 4 and 5. And it worked very well for them. And they won both of those games and were able to, get up to the 3 wins and kind of sit in that driver's seat. They struggled to do it in Game 6. Obviously, the Kraken took great advantage of that. When Game 7 starts and Dallas goes back to doing that, why didn't the Kraken kind of have an answer for it? Right? Why didn't they try something new? And then after that, you have 2 intermission breaks to maybe try to make an adjustment, and they just were never able to really do it. And I don't know if it was in part just because the players were really tired. I think that was part of it, is that it requires a ton of effort to try to break through that physically and everything. But that I think is always going to be the one kind of question that lingers with me, is just why they weren't able to really kind of crack that nut after having multiple games to go at it.
Right. And I do think fatigue was probably a pretty big part of it. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but in the exit interviews today, there were a couple players that did kind of hint at that fatigue and, how tired the team was after that grind that they had experienced. And I think it really does add up. And one lesson that I really want the Kraken to take away from this year's playoffs is to seize those opportunities when you have a chance to really put a team away, when you have your opponent on the ropes, whether that is game 6 against Colorado, where you can close the series out there, get yourself a couple extra days of rest before you go on to Dallas, which I think would have helped them a lot, or whether that's game 4 against Dallas, where you have a chance to go up 3-1, really put them on the ropes at that point, and you still have some energy, you're playing at home. Kind of seize those moments more, because when you don't, these series can get more drawn out, and you can be left in a game 7 like that, where it's a really tough task to forecheck, to get home, to find those pucks. It's going to take a lot of energy, and maybe you just don't have that much energy left.
Yep, and that's, it's what you're saying is definitely a key thing. It's something all newer groups struggle with when they're early on together, and I think that was another key thing that came out through this whole postseason run, was the fact that, hey, yeah, let's keep in mind, these guys, the core of this team has only existed together for 2 seasons, because that's all the team has existed for. Right? Like, yep, there's got to be growing pains there still, right? It makes it that much more impressive what they were able to do in the postseason in this one. Philip Grubauer was incredible in that Game 7, one of the best Game 7 goaltending performances I had ever seen, certainly that I had ever witnessed in person, especially because that was my first ever Game 7 in person. But Philip Grubauer was super impressive. RJ, the one thing I want to come away from all of this, if it's the only thing that comes away from all of this, is I just want people to settle down with the Grubauer hate. Like, just get it out of here. Like, season 1 was what it was. We all know that. He knew that. Everybody knew that. It's what it was. Season 2, though, once he was healthy, played great down the stretch in the regular season, incredible postseason. He is the Kraken's #1. That's just the way it is, everybody, and he's not bad.
Right. He played well, especially in the playoffs. When it matters most, he was able to step up and play his best games. And I talked about that fatigue kind of getting to everyone, I think. I talked about that schedule being really tough. You know who loves the grind? Philip Grubauer. Yeah. And he was talking about it today, how he just loves being able to get into that rhythm. And he thinks that getting that kind of workload and being the guy really brings the best out of him. And I think we saw that in the playoffs this year. And I think everyone needs to remember that kind of all summer and as we approach next season.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big one. We'll talk a little bit later about him and my ideas for maybe how the Kraken can utilize him next season to best keep him, ready to go for another potential postseason run next year, because that's certainly going to be what's expected at this point moving forward. Mm-hmm. We'll be talking about that in the next couple days, I'm sure. As for the game itself, you get the 2 stars goals. A lot was talked about with that Rupe Hintz goal, RJ, that first one. Is it on Alexiak? Is it not? I mean, you want to say your piece on it just because, we all kind of have to.
Sure. I mean, it was definitely a big turning point in that game, and the Kraken had held and held and held, a lot of bending, and then it finally broke at that point. So a puck gets lifted up into the air, kind of aerial flip out of the zone for Dallas, and it lands in a way that Jamie Alexiak doesn't quite expect. He's got to go quickly try and adjust to that puck, tries to bring it from one side of his body to the other side. Hintz is able to intercept it at that point and take it in for essentially a breakaway and score. I have a really hard time blaming Jamie Alexiak or any defender on a play like that, where the puck's in the air and you just don't know how it's going to bounce. It's a really tough split-second decision there. And, maybe if you're being nitpicky, you'd say that you would like him to just kind of slap it over to the boards off to the side really quick and not try and, corral it and take it and move it past the Stars player there. But it's such a quick decision. I don't know how in the moment you can expect him reliably to do something different.
So I agree with you in the sense that I think Alexiak took a lot of flack for that one when he didn't need to. because when I watched it live in person, the person I was looking at the whole time and that I thought was kind of misplaying the situation was actually Will Borgen.
Because he was going out wide there.
He
You
goes
thought he was
so
too wide?
wide. Yeah, he's so wide. And I don't understand why in that situation you're going wide, because that puck's up in the air, it's getting flipped up in the air. If it doesn't take the weird bounce that it does where it almost goes backwards, it's it's going to pull your partner Alexiak out of position over to the side. Like, Borgen has to be in the middle there. That's like what you're supposed to do in that situation, is to come more towards the middle. You can cover the middle. He'd be more in front of Hintz where he is at that point in time. It was just one of those that when it happened, like, I wasn't even looking at Alexiak the entire time as it was happening live. I was just like, where is Borgen going? Like, he's just spectating off to the side of the play. And if Borgen had come over more towards the middle to support his partner, just in case something like that ended up happening, which is what you're supposed to do, he would have been able to be there, and Hintz is not able to kind of work inside on I know he doesn't totally work inside, but he's going to have to really be forced to the outside. He's not going to be able to get the kind of grade A chance that he was able to get, and I think the way Grubauer was playing, Grubauer probably makes that save. So I was a little surprised that didn't really get talked about, but I think that was one of those things where it was, for the Kraken in this game 7, whether it was on the forecheck, whether it was some of the defenders, there was lots of like little mistakes that kind of added up to the whole, and I felt like that was another one for this team. It was interesting because it's one where I felt like, a lot of Dallas fans were upset when I put out that tweet about how, like, the Kraken weren't able to kind of live up to the level Grubauer was playing, and all these Dallas fans were like, hey, Dallas just played a complete game, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't know, I still think I'm walking away from this one, RJ, ultimately going, I think the Kraken dropped the ball.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I do agree with you. And that was a winnable game. It really was. As you mentioned, going into the third period, it was still a winnable game. And again, credit to the Stars defense for being able to shut things down in the third. But I don't think we saw the Kraken's best effort in a number of ways. And you talk about that goal that goes in, the Hintz goal. It's funny, we're breaking that play down and all the little bits of it, when I think there were more egregious defensive zone mistakes, a lot more in the 5 to 10 minutes before and after that play that probably deserved to cause goals against more than that did.
The Sagan breakaway, all that stuff.
Right. It all adds up. And I just think it wasn't the Kraken's best effort.
No, it wasn't. But still, lots of good things about it. One of the things I want to talk about is at the end there, and the handshake line, and really just the unique relationship that you and I built doing the post-game lives with Dallas Stars fans, but really just with the Kraken players and community, with the Dallas Stars players and community. RJ, when was the last time you saw a handshake line at the end of a 7-game series where every single player on the ice was smiling and like happy to like shake each other's hands and walk off and skate off the ice?
I can't remember another time where I saw that much collective happiness from both sides of a handshake line in a playoff series. I can't remember anything quite like that. It was most noticeable on Philip Grubauer's face. I mean, he was kind of smiling ear to ear the whole time.
Yeah, and he had a lot to say to just about everybody on the Stars team. So I thought that was really, really cool to see. That was not something that I expected, just because you don't expect to ever see that. But then as I thought about it, I mean, look, it was a 7-game series. It was a hard-fought series. Both teams played hard, as they should and would. You would expect them to. But there was never anything like controversial. There was never a dirty play. There wasn't anything like we saw in the first round with the Makar situation or the Eberle on Cogliano. Like, there was none of that kind of stuff that would really build ill will in this series against the Stars. And it was just kind of nice to see, when I know some of that other stuff can get bigger headlines around the league and through the media and stuff, that, you know what, you can play a really hard fought series, it goes 7, all that stuff, without players having to resort to being dirty and doing whatever possible and playing to the whistle and blah 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 and all that stupid stuff that some of the guys out there say. I just thought it was nice that this was a great example, not just on the ice but also with all the fans and stuff off the ice, that like, it seems like most of Kraken Nation is just right on board now with the Stars because they don't want Vegas to win. And the Stars fans were very gracious and everything too. Like, it was just a really interesting and exciting, positive thing.
And I think that's what you want it to be. I mean, I was kind of struck on that last post game with how many Kraken fans were saying, "Yeah, I don't usually root for a team that eliminates mine, but I'm going to
Yeah,
make an exception here. I'm going to root for Dallas the rest of the way." And Stars fans even saying that I came into this series as a Stars fan, didn't think much about the Kraken, but I saw so much from them that I'm going to make them my second team. Like they're kind of
yeah,
my second team that I'm rooting for. And I think that's really great. That's what you want out of a playoff series where it was still a hard fought series. It was still very entertaining.
yep.
There wasn't any less compete from either side there. But I just like to see that, whereas a lot of these other series can get really nasty, and some bad things can happen. I mean, we saw it in the Colorado series. Unfortunately, I think it kind of started off like this one,
Yeah.
finished out, I thought. But I'd rather have this series than the previous one.
Oh, definitely. And it's kind of interesting. I wonder how much of that is because on the Kraken side of things, we all had to go through that Colorado series. On the Dallas side of things, they all had to go through that Minnesota series. So for both of us as collectives to come together and just have it be a series without any like issues, we were all just like, oh wow, that's what this could be. It could just be like enjoyable to watch hockey without any controversy or anything. I'll take it. Wow, that's incredible. That's some good stuff. There was some interesting stuff. Being there in person, for the Game 7, the media availability stuff. Obviously, the day of Game 7, the team felt very positive. It's Jordan Eberle's 33rd birthday. That was, a big deal. It was clear everybody was going on. Welcome to the Black Parade was playing in the locker room when we went in there for the morning, after morning skate to talk to the players and everything. And the vibes were all really positive, and that's something I'll always take away was just how into it everybody was. And Hackstall, I thought, said something interesting during his morning availability, which was, it was only like a 12-minute morning skate that they did. And he was asked about, like, why was it so short? And he said, well, look, for one, this is our second Game 7 in 2 series. Fatigue is a factor. I'm not going to push the guys before this game kind of thing, which made a lot of sense. But it was also, you wanted to give everybody time before a Game 7 because everybody has their own individual ways of processing and preparing for something like that. And the way he talked about it, it made it sound like it came across very all-knowing. Like he could have told you right then and there what everybody's process was, everybody's individual process was. And just the way he talked about the group both before and after the game, it was really impressive to me. And I guess I should save some of this for tomorrow when we actually hear from Hackstall. But it was cool to me just how kind of fatherly, leaderly it was. I guess fatherly is kind of the right word. And it was just really, that was really cool to see. And then just I'll reiterate for those who didn't listen to the post game live when I was eventually able to join like an hour in, but just the whole organization from ownership down through the front office, Ron Francis and everybody. Once the game ended, or even as the game was ending, like we went down as the media before the game was over. There was about 4 minutes left. We got down there with about 3 minutes left. Lywicki came out. We were outside the locker room. Lywicki came out and he like fist bumped us all, kind of thanked us for the season and everything. I thought that was a very classy thing to do, and it was just very like, he wasn't upset. Nobody was upset. It was just like, hey, this is this is what happened, right? And it's 2-0. About a minute after that, Bjorkstrand scores. It's 2-1. Flip switched in that dude's head. He was the biggest fan of his team. It was fantastic to see because we're all just standing around outside a locker room in the bowels of American Airlines Center. And I hope I'm allowed to tell this story. I don't see why I wouldn't be. And we're all just watching off of this little TV. It's like a little 24-inch TV hanging up in the up top. And he's just totally into it, and just throughout the whole thing he's like, it's only one goal, we can do this, they can totally do this, they've got this. And then it was, it gets down to that last like 9 seconds or whatever, right? And Dallas takes the timeout, and it's going to be an offensive zone face-off, and he's just like, hey, offensive zone face-off, we win the draw, we take a shot, we score, like this is how it happens, like this team can totally do this, we can do this. And I just thought it was so cool to see someone in a position like he is in, to be a fan of his team and to believe in his guys like that. Like, it was just like, he was just like, no, they can do this. They could totally do this. Like, why do you guys all still look solemn? Like, this is all fine now. Like, it was really cool. And I think, I couldn't help but wonder, I don't think that, there's a lot of owners that would be that way. I don't think there's a lot of owners that would want to be standing there with us, for one. I think that's a unique situation and thing. But also just to believe and be that much of a fan of his team and all of that stuff. I'm not just trying to say this for brownie points or access somewhere someday, everybody. I really thought that was a thing, and I think that idea, it trickles down throughout the culture of that organization, the belief in the team, the belief in the guys, and just being a fan of them and the sport, I think is really, really important. And when you have the people at the very, very top be like that, I think it really matters for something, and that's why I wanted to share that.
Yeah, I love that story. And you know what? Anybody who has met him, who has seen him around, I don't think anyone would be surprised by that story whatsoever. So you talk about, yeah, we're allowed to tell that story. I think it kind of fits, with this character and everything that we've seen, everything that I've seen, certainly, through this season. So that is great to hear. And, glad he had that belief kind of, to the last seconds. And I know he's proud of the team, everything they've accomplished on and off the ice. And we are too.
Yeah. All right, so that's really it. I mean, look, the bottom line was, I think we talked about it during one of the post-game lives for that series, RJ. Dallas is more in their window than the Kraken are. Like the Kraken are still up and coming. The best is still ahead for them. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with them falling in 7 to a Dallas Stars team that very much, one of their leaders, one of the reasons why so many Kraken fans are rooting for Dallas is a guy like Joe Pavelski, who's like 75 years old right now, right? Like, who knows how much longer he's got, how much longer a lot of the guys. Ryan Suter, I thought, had a pretty decent series. Another older guy on that team. So I just think there's no shame in what happened in falling to Dallas in 7. Obviously, you fall to a great coach who's perfect in Game 7s, moves to 7-0. There's no shame in that either. All that good stuff. So that's kind of it. I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about for the Dallas series, RJ?
I mean, not really. I think it was, a good hard fought series. I mean, it's kind of the stuff we've said already.
Yeah.
There's a part of me with certain elements of it that would maybe be more bothered if it was the Kraken's window and it was their time.
Yes.
And so we could kind of break those things down, but I just think, given the context of where this team is at right now, given the context of where Dallas is at right now, I think you have to look at it from the perspective of being satisfied with where they got to and what this team is, and being impressed that they were able to get kind of further than we thought. Next year, the expectations are on them. And if this exact type of thing happens next year, I think you'll probably hear a very different tone from the two of us about how it all goes down. But for right now, and I understand there's probably people thinking about it right now, as you're listening to this, oh, you're being too soft on them. They messed this up. They could have given a better effort here. And I think we can kind of acknowledge those little parts of it. Mm-hmm. But overall, given the context, I think this is kind of the takeaway that you have to have.
Yeah, no, next year you're right? We would be more on them for lacking the killer instinct, or we'd be more on them for the lack of maybe a consistent effort through both series, if we're being honest, right, from game to game, and those kinds of things. I think there's other stuff like, next year you're probably not going to deal with the ridiculous schedule you got dealt with this year, where you just played every other day except all for once, right? You only had one extra day off that entire playoff run. So 14 games in 29 days? It's a lot of hockey. It's a lot of hockey, and it's playoff hockey. So there's definitely some stuff. And, look, if you want that kind of stuff, just go and listen to the post-game pressers from Hackstall. He was always very honest after the games in which he felt like his team didn't do enough to win the 50-50 battles, or they were a step behind. That's what he said after this Game 7. He just felt like they were always kind of a step behind Dallas. They just weren't really up to that same level at the time. I think he's a really good coach as far as being honest about the effort that his team puts out there on a night in, night out basis. When they put out a good effort, he says so. And it's, it's obvious. and then on the nights in which they maybe struggle with it, he says so. And I do think, that's something I very much respect about him. And it's something that, it makes it so that, we don't always have to be as negative either, RJ, because if the coach is calling him out for not winning 50-50 battles, it kind of makes it hard for us to then just jump on board with that too. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh yeah, well,
exactly.
Team acknowledged it. All right. It is what it is. All right. So let's go on to the exit interviews and stuff with the players here, RJ. because there's a lot of stuff, and we'll talk about all these players as we go through. I don't know how you want to do this. I'm going to kind of hand it over to you. You can go through. I don't know. What are you going to do
Right.
for
I
us?
mean, I know as far as the format, I mean, here's how it works, by the way, just for these exit interviews. I've done this. This is my second season now doing this. So we kind of, we get there and we wait for the first player to go. And, it's like a normal scrum, right? Where you've got the media all around the player and we kind of take turns asking the questions. And then, we'll finish with that. We'll get the next player in and then it starts to speed up and it gets kind of rapid fire where as soon as you're done with one player just trying to get a tweet or a quote out or trying to remember what they said, the next one's there and you've got to get ready for it. So anyway, that's kind of how it works on our end. And so I mean, like the way I've experienced it today was basically just like, all right, here's what Eberle said, here's what Begna said. So I could kind of go player by player. I mean, I'll talk about some general themes, I guess, because I think there's some themes that came up, but it probably helped me memory wise just to go player by player. Sound good?
Yep, sounds perfect.
All right. So first, we got Jordan Eberle, and I thought Eberle had. I mean, he always has really great, really insightful things to say.
Yeah.
And it was interesting too because you could tell in his voice that, and what he said that, it was bittersweet, right? He felt proud of what the team had accomplished, of course, and felt like it was the beginning of something really great, and he loves it here too. I mean, I'll share kind of the quote that I shared on Twitter here, where he thought that Ron Francis and the organization have done an exceptional job. He said, "I'm excited to be here. My wife and I would love playing in Seattle. It's a great place to be when you wake up to the mountains and the lakes. It's just been first class." And so he really believes in the organization. And also he mentioned that Ron Francis, after last season, kind of had a conversation took some of the veterans in and had a conversation with them and made it clear to them, look, this is not going to be a rebuild. We're going to be going for this thing. And I think that probably went a long way with the guys, especially if it's something that Everly remembered and thought to say today. And because if you think back to last year's exit interviews too, like, look, the two of us, we weren't really sure kind of what direction it was all going in. Right.
Yeah.
We didn't know that it was going to be going that way. So it's interesting to know that, Ron Francis kind of had that plan all along and communicated it to the players.
Yeah, that's definitely nice to hear. I mean, I could totally see it because like last year, I remember the thing that really stuck with me from it was just that like everybody was just like, this season the end result was kind of unacceptable. Nobody wants a repeat of that. We need to be competing for a playoff spot next year. And we were all trying to read stuff into it, like, okay, season ticket holders are upset, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But it was also just like everybody was like, okay, I mean, we were talking after that last year, RJ, about stuff like, if the team starts off bad, how many weeks in before Hackstall's fired? Right? Like, that was a legit thought in everybody's mind after last year's interviews. So to hear just how far apart the organization was compared to kind of where we all were on the outside, I think it's important to remember that, they have a lot more information than we do. They're not going to disclose it with us because that obviously wouldn't make sense for them, but it's one that even when things seem rough or things seem different than what we all perceive it to be, I trust people like Ron Francis. I trust this front office and stuff, and there's not a ton of teams that I would say that about, right? If anybody's listened to our Red Glares, there's a ton of teams I would not be saying that about. But with this team, and I really do believe that, I'm not just saying that because it's the team we cover, all that stuff. I just think for what you just said, for that quote from Jordan Eberle, and then how this team performed this year and the way in which they went about it and the way in which those veteran players helped out everything, I think you have to just say, you know what, even when things look sketchy or scary or you're worried about something with the Seattle Kraken squad, you just go, look, I'm going to trust their process. I got to believe in them. And to me, hearing stuff like that is that's what that gives me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's that he's got that confidence there, and it's good to see that in kind of the big picture. But on the flip side of it, you could tell he was kind of disappointed in how everything ended. Look, a veteran player like that, you don't know how much time you have left to go chase a Stanley Cup. And he did emphasize how difficult it is to get to that spot. And just to even get back there, how much effort and how much work that takes. And one line that stuck with me was that he said, "There's plays that are going to haunt me all summer."
Hmm.
that he's going to be thinking about. And that's something that, it's hard to let go of as a player. And so, that stuff is going to stick with him. And you got that sense too, as far as a general theme from a lot of the veteran guys. They kind of repeated how difficult it is to get to that point and how much of an opportunity they had being there. And as much as you want to, be happy that it's potentially the start of something really great, it's a lot of work to get to that point.
It is. And one of the things that will stick with me for a really long time is after game 7, talking with Jordan Eberle, and he was asked about the fact that, look, you're playing with two young guys on your line, Maddie and Ty Cartier, and just kind of what's the message to them after this playoff experience, after going 2 rounds, 2 game 7s, all that kind of stuff. And his thing was just basically like, enjoy it, but also understand that that's really hard to do, and you don't know if it'll ever happen again. And he talked about the fact that it took him 7 years just to get to the playoffs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here Ty Cartier just walks in the middle of the first round and it's able to help him to a game 7 in round 2. So it is one of those things. He has a very unique perspective. He has one of the more interesting histories in hockey. He just does as a player, Jordan Eberle. And I remember we talked a little bit about this way back at the expansion draft, and the idea of him coming in and what is he going to be for this team. And we had preconceived notions about who he was just because of the journey that he had taken and the teams in which he had played on and the stories that were around those, particularly Edmonton. And it's been really, really cool to kind of get to know him and to hear him share stuff like that. Is a lot more introspective, and that unique journey that he's been on. It does feel like on this postseason run that the Kraken were on, a lot of that has been replaying in his mind too, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Jordan Eberle, like I knew about him, of course, as a hockey fan growing up. I mean, we watched him play, but just I've gained so much respect for him over these last couple of years, kind of getting to see everything that he means to this team and this locker room. And I mean, I've been saying it for a while now that if they were to name a captain, right away he might be the guy.
Yeah.
But great stuff from Eberle. One of the things I do want to get into that he was talking about, and this was a theme with him and some other players too. He was the first to bring it up, but one thing I thought was interesting is that he brought it up. Justin Schultz brought it up, and Yanni Gourde brought it up, all independently. They weren't asked about this separately or anything. And I thought this was interesting. And Eberle actually said it was the biggest thing for him, like as far as a takeaway for next season, is that he said, we're not going to surprise teams anymore. And that's going to be a real change. You're going to get kind of tougher efforts from other teams. And I think he even said that teams maybe at times took them lightly a little bit this season, and that's just not going to be the case going forward. I think it was Yanni probably who kind of pushed back. He said, "Well, I don't think the teams took us lightly, but they, you're going to get everyone's best effort." And I mean, Yanni knows what he's talking about. He played on the Cup winner Tampa, times 2, where you've got that target on your back. And I asked Justin Schultz because I was kind of curious about like what that actually looks like when you are the team that everyone is, okay, we're trying to beat them now, in a game, to have that target on your back. And he kind of, I think he had a little difficulty explaining. It's like, well, it's not really like, I guess it doesn't feel like too different in a game, but just generally you're getting everyone's best effort. Like they're not necessarily, targeting you kind of specifically as a team, but like you just see a lot less of their off nights kind of type, that type of thing. But he did say that he thinks that'll be good for the team. He's like, I think it's good to have that target on your back.
I think it is too, because it helps get you ready for postseason, right? And when it's like, hey, you do have to grind through it, and you are getting the best effort of the people opposite you. And yeah, I'm sure, I don't know. I'm like Yanni Gourde. I kind of push back to this notion that teams take certain games off or whatever. I think what happens is if you're looking at, you have 2 games on back-to-back nights, you maybe pick one of those as the one in which it's like, let's really game plan for that one, and the other one we'll just kind of roll in there and see what happens. I'm sure teams do that just because you kind of have to from a logistics standpoint, strategy-wise. But I'm with Yanni Gourde for the most part on that. I think the big thing is going to be, and I really feel like throughout the season, teams started to take them more and more seriously. And I think that's partly why we saw the teams struggle post All-Star break, was that teams were ramping up. Because I think over the All-Star break, coaching staffs, the players are all off doing whatever. They're either suffering through an ESPN All-Star break situation wherever the all-star game is, or they're off vacationing. But the coaching staffs are all at home, but they're also still all game planning things, and they're looking at stuff. And especially like the teams in the division were like, okay, the Kraken are for real now. We're in a dogfight. Everybody was still very much trying to get that top seed in division, top seed in the West. And teams like Vegas, Edmonton, Los Angeles, they were like, okay, this Kraken squad is not the team that we thought they were. We need to make sure we maximize these games against them. It's going to be tougher. Let's make sure we can kind of bury them if we can, and try to keep this just a 3-headed race instead of 4. And I think you're going to start seeing that with all of the Western Conference teams next year. And the Eastern Conference teams, maybe when you roll into a Boston and Boston's rolling, they're not going to just assume, they're going to keep rolling. They're going to be like, no, this is a serious squad coming in. We got to step up. And maybe you don't see the Kraken go in there and shut them out to give them their first regulation loss at home. I don't know. But it is an interesting concept to think about, but it's definitely a good one. It's one in which, yes, this is the progression for a team as it enters its cup competitive window. It's gotta get there first, does what it does, and then after that the expectations get reset continually higher and higher, and you either live up to them or you become the Edmonton Oilers.
Way to close that out. That's really good. Let's hope not here.
Yes.
So moving on from Jordan Eberle to Jacob Megna. So we got him next. And I mean, not a ton on him because, I mean, let's be honest, he didn't play a whole lot after the trade deadline. And he did say it was kind of a big adjustment for him to be playing so much in San Jose and then, of course, be out of the lineup once he got here in Seattle. But I think he did have this gratitude about him. And it's great. He said, every day you play in the NHL is a blessing. And I don't take it for granted. And so, I think he had the right attitude about it too. He didn't seem frustrated. He didn't seem bothered by it, and just kind of reiterated that, his goal for next season is just to come in, earn a roster spot in the lineup next year, and just try and get into some games.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk more about, the roster moves and the off-season stuff tomorrow, just talking and hearing from Ron Francis and stuff. I think that was more of our plan, but Jacob Megna is going to be one of those guys that I think he's got a good shot at being in that situation, right? With a Susie potentially probably leaving. I think you and I both think that's most likely going to be the case there. There's going to be an open spot, and Riker Evans has looked fantastic at the AHL level. Is the defense there yet? I don't know. We'll probably see come a training camp how the team feels about that, really what Hackstall feels about it. But I think Megna's going to have a really good chance at being able to crack the lineup and see some regular playing time.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, that spot's kind of there for him. He's under contract for another year. It's at a really good number as well. I think he's definitely in their plans. He did say they haven't had any team meetings yet, the exit interview meetings kind of with the staff and everything, as far as a message to him. But I think he's certainly in their plans. And the other thing that he added was how welcoming the whole group was when he got there at the trade deadline, and just how good of an environment it was to get thrown into, and that everyone was really nice and kind of embraced him with open arms, and he just kind of felt like part of the group, which, look, being around this team, being around that locker room, I'm not surprised at all. But it was still good to hear him say it.
Yep, and I'm not surprised by it, and I thought it was really interesting that all around the Game 7, both before and after the fact, it was something that was talked about by other media members. It was something that was talked about by Dave Hackstall, just what a great solid group this was. The players talking about how close they all are, how the whole playoff experience has brought them together even more, all that kind of stuff. And it got me thinking, RJ. I don't remember a ton of that last year. Granted, they were all trying to get to know each other still, and they were just kind of thrown into the season. But it still felt like this year it was even more so of the new additions were thrown in, but it felt like this year the identity of the team as a group, as friends, brothers in arms, whatever it is you want to call them, a team, really kind of solidified. And I can't help but think that what was the difference between last year and this year? It's, future captain Matty Beniers being there.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know if I would, go with Beniers as kind of like the main catalyst for all of that.
He was the only one trying to get the text chain going.
That's true.
The Mario Kart tournaments, right? Like, I'm just saying, Matty Beniers. Captain.
Yeah, no,
get used to it. Everyone.
I don't think that it was nothing as far as an impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I did think he definitely played a part, but I think the biggest thing, and you hear the players talk about it too, was just the fact that like last year you couldn't even do team building stuff or bonding stuff because of COVID. Like
Yeah.
there were just so many restrictions they had to deal with, and I think a couple guys just mentioned the team building thing they did kind of right before the start of the regular season in September, and going out on a big like team building retreat and how that kind of brought everyone closer together. And it was just things you couldn't do last year because of COVID.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of it. I know the veteran guys, Yanni Gord, Jordan Everly, Adam Larson, like they've all been talked about in that way too. I was just, pushing my thing. Need the engagement.
Got to
That's
lay
it.
the
Okay?
groundwork. Okay, there
We
you
need
go.
the engagement. Everybody's got to come at me for the Maddie for captain thing. All right, so that was Megna. Who we got next?
Next, we got Justin Schultz.
Nice.
And it was interesting because we've talked about maybe Seattle being a more attractive free agent destination.
Mm-hmm.
He was someone who signed here last season as a free agent when, a lot of the great things about Seattle still existed, but the winning certainly wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he had great things to say about it. About here, he said, "We have the best arena in the league. We have the best fans in the league. It's a pretty attractive place to come play, especially when we're winning." So I think that kind of says it all as far as the case to come join the Kraken if you're a free agent. But it certainly sounds like he was happy, with his decision.
I know. Again, we're going to talk about it tomorrow, but it's going to be interesting because Kraken are going to have cap space. They're an attractive squad to be joining, a team on the up and up. Lots of good benefits all around. Income tax thing helps.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be one. Like, I mean, we already gonna have to have the conversation about like there's too many people that everyone in the community wants to bring back. There's just not gonna be enough spots, especially with like a Burakovsky coming back and being healthy, a Shane Wright being added to the mix, trying to get a Riker Evans, maybe a Cole Lynn to come up from Coachella Valley. There is going to be changes this offseason. It's going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, it is still always nice to hear that the team is one in which people are going to want to join, and that it is a positive environment to play in. I think that that's a really important thing, and I think it's always important because one of the things that he mentions is the arena and the atmosphere around that, and the fans and all that stuff, and that is the one thing that we all can control. It's the only thing we can all control. We can't control how much money the team is going to spend. We can't control who they're going to spend it on, but we can control the fact that the players feel welcome, they feel supported, and that the arena is loud when it needs to be loud. And it's really awesome that the team is so good about acknowledging that and is appreciative of it. It feels good.
Yeah, it really does. The other interesting thing I thought Schultz said, where earlier in the media availability, he kind of referenced like something special about the group. He said we kind of play like we're in junior, like when we were kids, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And our friend Kate Shefty kind of asked him to clarify that, and he said that basically you're not looking at all the kind of distractions elsewhere. He said no one's looking at social media or listening to experts saying we're not going to win in the first round or not going to make the playoffs. We just go out and have fun. And I know it's, can be a bit of a cliche where, the coaches, the players talk about, oh, we don't listen to anyone outside. We just have belief in this room. But it seems like that really is the case. They don't go reading this stuff,
No.
For people saying they can't make it.
No, it's because they're too busy playing Mario Kart.
Clearly.
Video games are positive. What can I say, everybody? Yeah, no, it's the youthful exuberance of Captain Matty Beniers. Moving on.
There we go. Find a way to fit that as the answer to everything that we bring up here.
You know better than to actually challenge me to do that, because I will find a way.
That's true. We'll see. We'll see how you can do it for these future ones here. All right. So that was Justin Schultz. Next, we got Carson Soucy. Now, Soucy, of course, is a pending unrestricted free agent. His contract's up. I know you and I probably, if we had to put money on, we'd probably say he won't be back next season.
Mm-hmm.
But he did say, he said, I love this group. We battled for 2 years together and we're growing something here. So obviously I'd love to stay. He also said he knows it's a business and
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of it's not in his hands. At that point, it's kind of what the team thinks and, what offers he gets. So he knows that it's out of his hands, but he did definitely say that he loved the time here and he would love to stay. So that was good to see. And he was in good spirits as well.
Yeah, and still rocking the stash. Looked fantastic.
Yes, he had the mustache there. I know Mike Benton asked him, if he'd gotten any compliments on the mustache, and he's like, "Well, I don't know if they're compliments. People are more just so much as just like people like, oh, he went with the mustache. Okay.
Yeah, I think it looks great. Yeah, and let's be clear, right? Like it's not like we're trying to run Carson Soucy out of town or anything. It's strictly he's going to be a UFA in a defensive market that doesn't have a ton of options, as in a position that is highly sought after, and he's going to be in line for a big payday. And the bottom line is, you look at where he fits in on the Kraken, it would be back on the third pairing. Are you going to spend what, $4.5-5 million on a third pairing defenseman? No, I mean, just teams. No team is going to do that. But he can go and get more playing time somewhere else, get more money somewhere else. I will never fault a guy for taking that opportunity. You know what I mean? For going and securing, the financial interests of his family, as well as the increased playing time. Try to prove more of yourself than you can in the current spot. I get it.
Yeah, you got to secure the bag. You got to do what's best for you, and we'll see how it plays out. I did get the chance to ask him if his buddy Will Borgen may have kind of tried to convince him to stay or been lobbying for him to stay, and he said, "Well, I don't know if Will's gotten that far as to lobby me to stay." But I thought that was kind of funny that he's been thinking about it.
So that's him telling Borgen to sweeten the pot.
Yes, there you go. Gotta play hardball.
Maybe Soucy wants to room with Maddie.
That's a big bargaining chip there, I guess. We will get to the roommate stuff later.
Oh yes, I know.
Morgan wasn't doing a whole lot to up the value of it. I will say that much. And then so that was Carson Soucy. Interesting. You did get a question about like if he's going to take some time to see Jagger Firkus kind of work with him. Both of them from Irma, Alberta.
Just forever linked, those guys.
They really are. But hey, it's a small town. They all know each other. And I talked with Jagger Firkus's mom and his aunt at training camp, and they know the Soucys very well. They're very good friends. That's kind of how it is. And Carson did say that he will take a couple weeks or so. He won't have a ton of time, but it'll take a couple weeks to kind of train with Jagger and do their normal stuff.
That's good to hear.
All right, so that was Carson Soucy. Next, we got Brandon Tanev. So that's always a fun one. And I liked the confidence and I liked the swagger from Brandon Tanev. And I mean, like, what else is new, right? But the quote that kind of stood out for me is he said, last year was very difficult for a lot of us. And I think we all took that personally and wanted to come back this year and have a great season, which we did. I like he closed out this, which we did.
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, so the confidence was there, and I think he was just kind of proud of the team's accomplishments, but also wanted to emphasize, look, we came back better, and we did take it personally.
Right, and you know what? He came back too, right? Like, it's easy to forget also just him coming back from that significant injury and everything as well, and him to be able to return to form and be that fan favorite personality, both off the ice but also on the ice with the way he plays.
Yeah, definitely. And it was something too, talking about himself and the recovery and what this summer is going to mean to him too. He seemed really eager to have the opportunity to get a normal off season's worth of training regimen in. Whereas last season, he said it was a lot more knee focused. And now he can kind of focus on everything else, but he seemed proud of his own recovery as well.
Yeah, he should be. Good to hear.
Yep, he rocking the V-neck, a little bit of chest hair, showing some shorter shorts too. Had the outfit on point.
If you're a hockey player, like, what, you're an NHL hockey player too, right? Like, because like I could be a hockey player, I'm not gonna have legs like they do. Why don't they all wear super short shorts? Like Brad Marchand,
they should.
He always wears super short shorts. He's showing off those insane leg muscles. I don't know why they all don't.
Yeah, they really should. I mean, Tanev's doing it right. So next is Vince Dunn, and I thought this was really interesting because he is kind of the key to a lot of the Kraken's off-season plans.
Yeah,
the biggest domino there for Ron Francis and what's going to happen there. And of course, he was asked about his contract, and he said he hopes whatever contract gets worked out is in both his and the team's favor. So looking for a fair deal, but he did say, how much he wants to continue to play for this team. Here's the quote: "I want nothing but to continue to wear this jersey for many years to come. I'm all in, and I love this organization." And you could see it in how he talked about the team and everything that they've done. And the opportunity that they've given him, not just as a person, but as a player too,
Yeah.
on the ice to grow and kind of become the best version of what he can be.
Yeah. I mean, the cynic in me wants to say, what an RFA answer. But
I know, right?
but I know it's not just that. It's true though, right? Like he's getting to be a first pairing defenseman. He was able to be put into a situation where he could go out there and have the year that he did, where he scored 64 points. He had 14 goals. Like that's a big year, and he was able to prove that he was, that guy that I'm sure he's always felt like he could be throughout his career, and he wasn't really going to get the chance to be in St. Louis just because of how many players they had there, and it was always going to be hard to be able to show that. So it's going to be an interesting one. I have a unique take on maybe how the Kraken should deal with the Vince Dunn situation. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's episode.
Yeah,
when we
stay
talk about
tuned,
the
everyone. It's
future.
going to be some very interesting stuff tomorrow.
It's certainly going to get people talking. I'll give you that. I'm not just doing it to get people talking either. Like I legit think that it might be a direction for the Kraken to go in. But I do think that he had a fantastic season. The postseason performance, it was what it was, and it wasn't great. I think that that's something that the Kraken are going to have to figure out as they go through negotiations with him. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, certainly different numbers were starting to get thrown around today, even online, that seemed a little bit more palatable than before.
Yeah, and maybe Dunn wasn't doing a whole lot to help himself there, because he was asked about his own performance, his own growth this season, and he just described it as fine. Like, oh, my
Wow.
season I thought was fine,
How
like
hockey player of him.
I know, right? But it was a very hockey player. So I mean, you go back and watch the video, the demeanor and everything. It was fine.
And his
I mean,
age,
Allison was even ribbing him about it a little bit. Like, really, just fine? That's how you're going to describe the season you had?
yeah, you tell me his agent didn't come like diving in and shuffle him away really quick. Like what are you doing? We're both gonna get paid.
But Dunn, I will say this about him: he is very much a team first guy.
Yeah.
And he was focused more, and he's like, look, our team expectations was to make the playoffs, and we accomplished that. Personally, he's like, I didn't really have any personal expectations or any personal goals for myself. It's just he's that kind of team oriented in how he thinks about it.
Yeah.
So I hope he knows that he had a very good season. But maybe not for the contract purposes, but yeah, I'm sure he knows. And then one last thing on Dunn, Dylan, I know you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
He had great words to say, but he spoke more highly of him than himself about Adam Larson. You knew this was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the quote: he's a big piece of this team. I think every team has a little bit of a sleeper that doesn't really make headlines. He's my D partner. He's been a great friend of mine, a great partner to have all year, and he's given me every opportunity for success. I mean, he just kind of went on and on too about Larson and how they're good for each other. He said they're both they both have high expectations of each other, and they're both really hard on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to bring the best out of both of them. And you kind of see that in the room as well, with the two of them really just kind of pushing each other to be better and better, because they both have such high standards.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really positive thing, and I think it is positive when you are someone who's tough on themselves to have somebody who understands that because they are the same way, but also is able to look at you from an outsider's perspective and, pull you up, right, in those situations. And when you trust that person, when you respect that person, you're able to listen to them, and you are able to kind of find your way out of those dark places after a rough game or a rough situation or anything like that. And so I can totally see them having that relationship. I think that's a really important relationship to have for defensive partners. I think that's probably the ideal relationship that you could have. And we obviously saw it on the ice this year. Those two guys were phenomenal. I mean, never once did it feel like they were in any threat of being broken up by Dave Haxtell. Just no matter what was happening, those guys were going to be together, and they were going to be the top unit for this team. And so, it's good to hear, because I do think that Adam Larson is that guy, and it's nice when everybody gets to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. And Vince Dunn will certainly give him credit, even if he won't give himself credit. So good to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from Vince Dunn to another former St. Louis Blue is Jaden Schwartz. And I mean, the main thing I took away from Schwartz's media availability was kind of talking about his health. And of course, that was a big theme for him this season. He said he's in a lot better place, going into this off season than he was at this time last year. Because if you remember the exit interviews last year, he said, he really
Yeah.
wasn't certain about where his health was at, and he's like, I don't know where I'm going to be at the start of next season. So he says it's an improvement now, but he did call it a work in progress. He says he still has kind of more work to do there on getting his health absolutely right. And I mean, not a huge surprise to us. We know
Yeah.
he's kind of had to do the tracksuit regimen. He's got that skin condition, and it's been kind of rough for him there. But it's good to see that he's improved at least.
Yeah, and it's one where like this was always the concern with him. It's always been, can he be healthy? It's something he struggled with throughout his career. It's a really unfortunate thing. But the amazing thing about him is just how consistent he is from a production standpoint. No matter how many games he's playing, he's giving you that same level of production. It's a good level of production. It's a consistent level of production. You know what he's going to do when he's on the ice. And I thought he did it, faced with an injury situation that is, not super common. It's different than just say having a soft tissue injury or a broken leg or something like that, right? When the pads are literally causing this issue for you and you're not able to practice, for him to continue with that same level of play that we saw from him last year that he had in St. Louis. I mean, you just go look at his stats, everybody, and you just you multiply the point totals by whatever you need to make the seasons all match for the games played, and it's all like the same. He's always within like 10 points of himself, like his entire career. It's so impressive. And then also the way he was able to elevate for the postseason as well, 10 points through the 14 games, 5 goals. I think that was really important too. So Jaden Schwartz, I was really happy for him that he was, otherwise relatively able to stay healthy. He's played 71 games this year. That was a big number for him. I'm really happy about that. And I'm happy that he was able to find some success. He was able to be kind of locked down on that second line with Alexander Wenberg. That was, again, an issue that was there last year, was where does he fit in? Where is he going? He's bouncing all over. So for him to have kind of found a spot and played a lot of games, I was really happy for him. It's just unfortunate that, it cost him practice time.
Right. And Schwartz, I mean, he was one of those few guys we talked about getting inside in that Dallas series in the challenge. He's one of the few guys who was able to consistently do that throughout the playoffs for the Kraken. And as we'll get to a little bit later, the guys who played with him really enjoyed playing with him. So that's Jaden Schwartz. Next, we had Alex Wenberg. And I mean, Wenberg, his hair was a little crazy today.
Whoa.
Got a like a Conan O'Brien reference. Someone mentioned it was, had some height to it,
had some lift. All right.
Yeah. But I guess my takeaway from Wenberg, and he talked about how great the fans are. He talked about, how wonderful it is in Seattle. But I asked him too if there was any moment that was kind of a highlight of the season for him, something that stood out for him. And I asked this of a few different players. And you know what? Everybody I asked had the same answer as far as what their highlight of the season was. Care to guess what it was, Dylan?
I mean,
it was a game.
Oh, okay. It was a game. Was it the Boston game?
Nope, not the Boston game. Playoffs, if that helps you.
Oh, okay. I mean, Game 7 over Colorado.
Yep, that's what it was. Game 7 over Colorado. I mean, I think a lot of the guys felt like that was kind of that, highlight for them, that achievement of defeating the defending champs and kind of going on to the next round. And a lot of the guys felt that they had, one of their better games, even though they kind of played the rope-a-dope with them in the beginning. But they did really show some pride about that game, and Wenberg was certainly a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, important game. Like, I get it. Yeah.
Do you disagree?
I think it's a little basic. So I'm a little upset with everybody for that. Oh, what was our biggest game? It was the one in which we defeated the defending Stanley Cup champions and won the first playoff series in franchise history. It's like, well, yeah, okay. The fact that I guessed it within 2 guesses is a problem, in my opinion. I want it to be like, oh, there was this game in the middle of November that nobody remembers, but it was such a dogfight between us, and the battle on the ice was so intense.
The Penguins game.
Yeah,
it was a watershed moment.
Exactly. I want one of those old-timey hockey stories. Sorry.
All right. Well, sorry to disappoint there. So one thing I know will not be disappointing is we're moving on to Morgan Geekie. Yeah. Morgan Geekie was next. And I mean, he is always a good interview and had lots of great stuff to say. I mean, I'll start with kind of relating it back to Schwartz and Wenberg, who we just talked about, because he was asked about playing on the wing with those guys during the playoffs and kind of being elevated to that spot and that role. And he reiterated, like, I've never played wing before. He's like,
Hmm.
never in my hockey career have I played wing. And, it was an interesting adjustment. And I think he liked some aspects of it, but it was kind of funny, in his like dry way of talking, how he usually says, he's like, well, I'd definitely be open to playing wing some more if I can keep playing with those guys. So, letting the coaching staff know.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
but
important.
Morgan Geeky, yeah, he was, he was his normal self. He was asked about, being on baby duty now, and he said
Mhm.
definitely, that's kind of what it's time for. He's like, I try and do my best, but it's hard to when you're playing. And about the T-Birds too. Are you going to go to some of those games? He said he watched the game last night on TV because, of course, his brother Connor playing for the Winnipeg Ice against the T-Birds, and Geeky's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if. I don't know if I'd be too well received there, in Seattle, since I used to play for Tri City. I mean, you can tell the Thunderbirds fans really left a lasting impression on him. Um, he was talking about Kraken fans and how
Traumatized.
great yeah, seriously. He was talking about Kraken fans and how great they've been this season, kind of toward the end of his interview. And, he's like, they've been awesome. You see the energy from them. He's like, I'd say they're probably not as mean as the fans in Kent, but like, but I do play for Seattle now, so that's kind of how he ended it. But definitely remembers that stuff. Um, let's see what else. Okay, Allison, this was great. She asked him about his teammates' chirping skills, and he's
Hmm.
always going to give a good answer on something like that. So few bullet points here, because he's like, oh well, let's see, like, who do you want? Said Tanev, straight to the point. Uh, Borgen's a little more lighthearted. Benir's a little more lighthearted.
Yeah.
He said, it's funny whenever Tolvi tries to do it because of his accent or whatever. He said, actually, the Europeans think they're funnier than they are because of their accents. They think they're just like really funny when they're not always. He's like, but you know what? They actually are really funny. They're hilarious. So there's that. And he did add that Adam Larson is the funniest guy in the room. So there you go, Dylan. I'm sure you're not surprised.
I'm telling you, Adam Larson, I just imagine it being like a 3-camera sitcom in there where it's like stuff happens and then it like cuts to Adam Larson and he just makes like the same face as he always has, but it's just like the punchline and everybody laughs.
Yes.
Like I just imagine that's what it's got to be like. And don't we all want it to just be that way?
I know, it'd be great. Need to get more cameras in there. And I've seen moments certainly like that
Yeah.
from Adam Larson, and we got Adam Larson actually right after that. And so Allison was like, "Hey, Morgan just said you're the funniest guy on the team. What do you think about that?" And just no comment.
Oh, dude, that's the one time you'd lean into it. And you say, "Of course." Just deadpan, of
Yeah,
course.
just of course. That would be pretty great. So for Adam Larson, kind of moving on to him. First of all, he was rocking a Sonics hat for his exit
That was
interview.
awesome.
So
That was really cool.
major points for that. That's great. And I mean, it was kind of the normal answers, from Lars, and like, again, didn't break from that whole monotone thing, but it was great. I asked him about, because I mean, look, he's the team's only like Iron Man over the
Yeah.
first 2 seasons. He's played every game in franchise history, and I know that you put a lot of work in during the season, but there's a lot that goes in during the off season that
Hmm.
fans maybe don't get to see. And so I was asking him kind of like what work goes into that from now to September that allows you to play all those games.
Yeah.
And the look that he gave me for a sec, he's like, well, first you have a rest, you take a rest. And then he's like, but yeah, and then you get back to work, and there's a lot of stuff in the gym and everything. But he made an interesting comment. He said, the older I get, the less time I can take off.
Hmm.
Like, kind of and he didn't say the word afford, but it kind of sounded to me like, the way I interpreted it was like, the less time I can afford to take off.
Yeah.
You kind of need to put more work in the older you get, and you can't really take as long of a break. And so I think that's just kind of an interesting dynamic for a player, who's, I mean, he's not that old, but still, it's, on, he's over 30.
I was gonna say, according to your age models, RJ, I mean, he's fallen off a cliff. You know what I mean? He's got one foot in the grave already. He's 30. But
He
I
doesn't age like the rest of them do.
no, okay. It's no, I totally get it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's the state of current athletics, right? I mean, everybody's kind of in that boat, and I think it's different for young guys like a Matty, where it's like, go and try to add weight and do all that other stuff, whereas with an older player, it's, let me take care of my joints and let me make sure that I can, maintain stuff. And keep things going when the metabolism starts slowing down. I turn 29 later this month. I can feel that. I can't imagine trying to be a professional athlete and trying to monitor as your body and stuff changes as you get a little older. So yeah, I totally get that. And it's interesting too, RJ. I mean, we don't know what would happen if he was to miss a game. For all we know, he misses one game, the franchise just folds. Like, we don't know that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, they could completely fall apart. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So very
CPA
important
gets
that he
sucked
keeps.
into a sinkhole or something. We have no idea.
Yep, I think that's probably your leading theory is as to what would happen. The whole franchise would fold. It would be nothing without Adam Larson. But you know what? We don't know that that's not the case.
Yeah, prove me wrong, somebody.
Yeah. And then the last thing on Adam Larson too, and this was part of that general theme I was talking about earlier, but of all the players, I think he may have had kind of the most appreciation for just how hard it was to get to that point of the second round. And you know, I think he felt a lot of the disappointment of not going further, given all the work that he and a lot of the guys put in. And I mean, you know, it's hard to say who put in more work than he did, given how he played every game and was playing some of the top minutes. And I think he just had this real appreciation for the opportunity to get to the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know the effort that he had in the playoffs too, right? That effort in Game 5 in Dallas, like he was the guy out there trying to will that team to a victory. You felt that from him, and it's interesting. Not only does he play every game, RJ, he scores 8 goals a year. So everybody, go ahead and book that. Feel safe about that. You could just mark it in. Gonna get 8 goals next year. It's what he does.
There you go. Put some money down on it. It's a sure thing. So that's Adam Larson. On to another blue liner, Will Borgen. And I really I always enjoy the interviews with Will Borgen. Again, he's not the most talkative guy, but if you can kind of get him to open up, it's really great. And so this was probably my favorite question. I just thought of it as we were going with the presser, but I wanted to kind of get into that roommate relationship between him and Matty Beniers. So I think I caught him off guard a little bit with the delivery, but I'm like, we've heard so much about how Matty Beniers has grown as a player throughout the course of this year. How has he grown as a roommate? And he got some laughs there, and he's like, "Oh, geez, not much." And then he did go on to talk about, how Matty, he's a good roommate, and how I think he's ended it with like, he's learning every day. He's learning stuff every day. Learning how to be a pro, and I guess I'm learning every day too. So that
they just sound like those guys, in college.
Yep.
That are just like those guys. Like, they're not like the Chads per se, but they're just like the lovable guys that just don't know anything, about living on their own for the first time or whatever. That's just how they come across.
Yep, just buy a pallet of Gatorade and some cup noodles, and you're good.
Like, I think it was Greg Wyshynski from ESPN that asked during the Game 7 after the morning skate, asked Matty about, being roommates with him, and, if there was like a chore, who's responsible for what chores, who does dishes or whatever, and he was just like, we don't really like do dishes. He was just like he was just taken off. It was just like taken off guard. He's like, we just don't really like have that. Like, we take out the trash, but like he's like, dishes, like we just don't kind of like make or do dishes. Like, and I'm just like, no, because they're professional athletes for one, so their metabolisms are crazy. I'm like, they're like the guys that just take a box of cereal, they pour the milk into the box of cereal, and then they eat the whole thing out of the cardboard box, a soggy, leaky cardboard box. That's what those guys are doing.
I could totally see that. And for a second, we're going to skip ahead to Matty Beniers just to get to his response to this, because I did ask him the same question about Will. And he paused for a second. He's like, oh, my tongue. I can't answer. But hey, being future captain material, he paused for a second. He gave a very diplomatic answer about how great of a roommate that Will Borgen is, saying that he kind of helps him, remember stuff sometimes, and, remember to be on time sometimes to places. And he's like, look, I mean, I wouldn't be totally lost without him, but, it is really helpful to have him around. We have a lot of fun together. So there's the roommate dynamic. If you want to see the video of both answers, it's on Twitter. I just cut it together and put it up, but I really enjoyed that.
Bless them both. That's all I can say.
Yes. Bless them both. One more question I wanted to get into Will Borgen too, because I mean, watching him during the playoffs, like the physicality and all of that, and thinking of his game, I just felt like, okay, this guy is built for the playoffs, right?
Hmm.
With that strength, with the physicality in his game. And so I asked him, like, do you kind of agree with that, given how you play? And he's, are you built for the playoffs? And he's like, well, I mean, just like hockey in general, right? It's a physical game. So I kind of like that answer from him. And yeah, he's like, I don't really, change how I play. I kind of am that physical all the time. But in the playoffs, it does ramp up a little bit. So he did address that.
I was gonna say, because that was one of your big things going into the playoffs, was like
Did you not see it from him?
we were gonna see that from him, and I felt like he played just the way he played in the regular season. Like I totally feel what he's saying there. I
Okay.
don't know. I notice it much more with the forwards, right? Like from like an Ellie Tolvanen or Ryan Donato, where it's just like they step up physically, where it's like every single time on the forecheck they're finishing a hit. I think with defensemen it's a little tougher because it's much more subjective based on what the play is going on, right? Like you can't,
Right.
you're not always in a position to be super physical.
Right, but also just kind of some of the behind the play stuff, the sneaky little things that add bumps and bruises. Like, I could go over the little video clips and stuff that a lot of the angry Colorado fans were sharing,
As
things like that.
I was
But
gonna say, I'm looking at the stats. He was far more physical in the Colorado series than the Dallas series.
I'll give you that. I think that's true.
I'm looking at his hit numbers. I mean, a couple goose eggs, 1, 2, in the Dallas series. So, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's better suited for more of a hate-filled series.
yes.
I think he's someone certainly you want to have around if
Well,
it does get to that point.
I don't associate Will Borgen with anything along the lines of hate filled.
No, no, definitely not. It's just like
It
if
just
the
sounds
series is
weird.
hate-filled, you want someone who can handle himself. Yeah, Borgen, no, furthest thing from hate-filled that I can think of.
Yeah.
Um, so moving on from Will Borgen, next we had Daniel Sprong, and I was looking forward to this for sure because I mean, not only is he one of the biggest free agent questions that the Kraken have this season, he's an RFA, but I can't imagine they're going to qualify him. Don't want to go to arbitration, all that stuff. But also, he's just one of the most interesting players in all of hockey,
Hmm.
given the production that he was able to have in such limited minutes. And so I just think that dynamic was really interesting. And so, as for the free agency question, he kind of said, look, but that's what you have agents for. He'll handle all that, and he's going to make whatever decision he needs to. But I was curious about kind of what he thought of his role this season, because there's kind of two schools of thought, right? One that like this is just kind of who he is, and this was the role
Yep.
that's meant for him. You to be kind of getting fourth line minutes, but really excelling in that role. And there's the other school of thought that this just shows that he's ready for more opportunity. That if you give him bigger minutes, maybe he can score at that pace still and be a real impact player for you in the top six. And so I asked him if he was kind of comfortable with that role of limited minutes, and he wasn't shy about it. He said, look, I want more minutes. I think that I benefit from more minutes, and I do. But he did couch it, kind of say that, look, if you ask any of the 23 players in the locker room, they're all going to tell you they want more minutes.
Yeah.
They all believe in themselves. But you definitely did get the sense talking to him there that I think he really believes in himself, and thinks that he could do better if given a bigger opportunity.
Right. And, I respect that. I really do. And I think that this year was that for him, right? I mean, he had to come in and on a tryout contract and then be like, yeah, no, I can do this, and prove
Yep.
himself and try to go and have a job for next season. Like that's what this year was him playing for his future and not having to go to Europe or go to the AHL or something like that, but to stay in the top league in the world. And he did everything he possibly could to make that happen. And I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think he recognized that too. I like the confidence from him, where he was, he said too, like that, that was whatever it is, what it is, the role that I had. It
Mhm.
just, that's the reality. That's the role that I had. And I think I did a pretty good job.
Right.
So, to go out and say that about your own game, I like that from him. And so I'll be interested to see kind of what his mindset is, going into free agency this summer. A couple more things on Daniel Sprong on the lighter side. So I posted a picture with a quote on Twitter, and I expected the quote to get most of the attention,
Mm.
but the picture actually seemed to get more attention, as these things sometimes work. But he's wearing a New York Yankees hat, Dylan, as I'm sure you saw, and people are all over him about that. Look, I don't like it either, but thoughts on the Yankees hat there, Dylan?
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. Like what? It's
Need to
just
get him a Mariners hat.
you get him. I mean, it's not even just like, oh, it's not a Mariners hat. It's like the Yankees.
I
Like
know
when
of
you
all
wear a
teams.
Yankees hat, like you're making a statement, and that statement is, "I'm in favor of evil empires." That's what that statement is.
Yeah, well, he was making that statement. I don't know. I should have asked him a question about it. So as he was kind of walking off, that'd be a fun one. It's one where I know that if the season was continuing and I just kind of saw him in the room the next day, I could ask him about that and he'd give me some great answer or a ton of talk about it with me or explain, oh, why he's a Yankees fan. He could tell you everyone up and down the lineup or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. But that's the kind of thing I would expect. So unfortunately, I won't be able to follow up with that quickly. But anyway, let's get to the quote on the picture because
Yep.
that's what I found the most interesting. And I know a lot of you are going to really appreciate this. So he was asked a question from our good buddy Charles Hamaker at Circling Seattle Sports. How great is it, having Andre Burakovsky around and, kind of what's that been like this season? And Sprong said, yeah, that's why I missed 2 practices before the playoffs started. I needed a bromance break.
I love it so much. Oh,
Dissect that one,
it's.
Dylan.
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. I think so, and it makes me wonder. What if Berkey had been around, right? Like they
I know.
stuck them on a line together.
Power there together.
True fourth line right there.
Yeah. And he added too that like they were both Washington Capitals, but they missed
Yeah.
each other by a year.
Yeah.
So they weren't on the team together. And he's
I was
like, I
gonna
kept hearing from, huh?
I was gonna say, like, how are they like such close friends?
Well, this is what he was saying. So they missed each other by a year, and Sprong was saying that like when he talked to guys that he played with in Washington, they're like, "Oh man, you're just like Berkey. Like you guys have so much in common." And he's like, "I don't know about that. I don't really believe it." And then he said, "We actually met then on the team this year, and we just totally clicked, and we've had I'll just say we had a lot of fun together."
All right, sounds good. So they're just match made in heaven. Sounds good.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, they're Caps teammates. I guess meeting them separately must have known something like, oh my gosh, you two would get along really well.
Yeah, maybe they're both Yankees fans.
Yeah, maybe that one I can ask Burakovsky about next season. Maybe we'll see if I dare on that one. So that was Daniel Sprong. Next was Philip Grubauer. And I mean, someone who certainly deserved to be, proud of the effort he put in the
Yeah.
playoffs. And of all the guys, because a lot of them, I think, definitely felt the fatigue, like I mentioned earlier, of playing that playoff run. I'm telling you, Grubauer, he looked like he wanted to just go play another couple
Totally.
7-game series. He was ready to keep playing, ready to keep going. He said he loves that grind of being in that schedule and that it lets you get in that rhythm and that focus. And like, that's kind of when he feels like he's playing his best.
Yeah, and I mean, the last we saw of him, he was playing his best. And I think missing the time to injury and then seeing what Martin Jones was able to do with this team, I think it motivated him. He knew what, last season was. He knew the conversation around him being on this team and the way that, a lot of the fan base felt about him, the way the media would talk about him, the way all that stuff would happen. And that he had to just be upset. He said as much with his performance last year and the way everything went. So for him to finally be back at a place where he's dialed in and he probably feels like he's playing as well as he's ever played in his career, and then it's just overnight over. It's got to be a really tough situation, especially after the year that he's had.
Yeah, it was a tough situation. And I will say, Grubauer, he made sure to give Jones a lot of credit for what Jones was able to do while he was injured. And he mentioned, while I was out, like Jones stepped up and kind of took control and gave him a lot of credit for kind of where the team was. And I think that was a really nice gesture there. We didn't get Jones today. Figure there might not be a whole lot to ask him. I think he's probably kind of out the door, but good from Grubauer there. And I also shout out Steve Briere, the goalie coach, because I think, he's been a big part of that. We kind of tried to push and ask like, okay, well, what are you working on next? What's the summer look like for you? And what kind of thing? He said, well, I'm going to have a meeting with Steve and we're going to talk about all the different things to work on. And we're going to go over that plan and like, okay, like kind of what things do you want to work on? He's like, well, that'd be a good question for him. You could ask Steve that. He definitely wasn't going to give away any of the secrets.
Yeah. Now, this has been my thing with him, RJ, because, and the conversation we can have tomorrow as we look at the overall roster and what they might have to do in the offseason, whether it's Chris Drieger, whether it's Joey Decor, whether it's somebody else, RJ. Philip Grubauer is going to be one of the two goaltenders for this team. I think it's pretty clear he'll be the starter for the team. I think based on what we saw from him this year, and the fact that he did have that injury and everything, it kept his regular season workload down, but then he was very fresh and ready to go, and he could handle the gauntlet that was game after game of the postseason. Would you be in favor of, it being closer to a tandem next season just for that reason, just for the workload reason, where it's Grubauer maybe gets 50 games instead of 60 like a regular starter would get for a team?
I would like to see that. And I know, like, if you ask Grubauer, he probably wouldn't tell you that.
Yeah, they're never going to say that. Yeah.
And that's exactly, I'm telling you, this is just something to know for hockey always. Goalies will always tell you that the more workload, the better they do. And that's what's best for them because they like being in that rhythm.
And they're all
goalies
liars.
No, I don't know if they're lying. I think they believe it. I think it's just that goalies don't know what's best for themselves workload wise. And so you'll see guys get burnt out because of that. And because teams will listen to them. And I think as a coach, it's one of those tough calls you always have to make and be like, hey, sorry, to my starter, you're sitting tonight because we got to work on the workload stuff. But I think that's what the Kraken should do. They're a forward-thinking organization. They're a progressive organization. Yeah. I think they'll be on the right side of that.
Yeah, and I just think this year was all the example and proof that you would need. Is how the season went. So I think, one where he plays twice a week and someone else plays once a week kind of thing. It's that like 2-in-1 approach or something like that. I just think is the way to go. So cool. We're on the same page there. That was my big fancy thing with Grubauer. Otherwise, like I said, everybody get off his back. He's great. It's fine.
Yes, he is. I think we can all agree on that right now. So only a couple more players to go here. I'm sure we're kind of running pretty long on this podcast, but I'll close it out with Yanni Gourde and then Matty Beniers. So we'll save Matty for the end because I thought he had some of the best stuff today. But Yanni Gourde, like the other vets, I think he realized the opportunity that the team had kind of getting into round 2 and how tough it is. But I think he was proud of the way that the team played and found their identity. And that's something that stuck with me from last year's exit interviews, where Yanni Gourde was saying, and like the question I think was like, what kind of additions need to be made? And let's all transport ourselves back to where we were at the end of last season, right? Third to last in the league, a really rough season. Like this team does not have the talent to get it done. And he was asked like, what kind of additions need to be made, for you guys to get where you want to go? And he kind of backed off. He's like, well, I don't know that we need to really add anything. Like, I think that we know how we need to play. Like we have the formula, like we know exactly how we need to play to work and to, to win and to get to the playoffs. Like we're capable of that. Like as we're capable of that. It's just a matter of like executing it for 60 minutes and for 82 games. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, okay, yeah, right. Like, I'm sorry, I don't see the identity here yet after kind of like you can see bits of it, but you just felt like there was so long of a ways to go. And I do think they needed to add things, but like watching it back, because I watched it back last night in preparation for this. And I'm like, you know what? This just sounds kind of prophetic. Like he knew what he was talking about. And, so I think Gourde, today just kind of echoed that sentiment of like, we know what we need to play, how we need to play. We know we need to be hard to play against. And like, we did a better job of it this year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of always, been his mindset. And it's been consistent from day one with this team. And you saw it in their identity this year, just being so hard to play against, being a 4-line team.
Yeah, it's really true. I think, one of the things I want to talk about tomorrow is continuing that and really keeping that as the identity for this group for a while. And, not just because of the expansion draft, but I think for other reasons, they're set up in a way in which it's going to let them continue to be that way. But I just think that's just true of Yanni Gourde too, is I think a lot of times the people that you think of as, the class clown or the person who always seems to be laughing and smiling regardless of the situation, or the person who's always a little bit looser, generally those people, it's not always because they're not taking things seriously or because they're just oblivious to the realities of the situation around them. It's just because they're comfortable and they don't let out external pressures get to them. They don't worry about things in the same way that other people worry about them. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're taking them seriously. And I think Yanni Gourde is one of those people where, look, he's someone who very reasonably could have expected to never play in the NHL. And yet here he is. He's played however many games, hundreds of games in the NHL. He's won Stanley Cups. He's done all of these incredible things. And it's given him perspective of, look, things happen, and he's able to look at them from a different, through a different lens that other players maybe don't acquire through their career when they just are the first round pick and then they play an extra year of junior and then they go into the lineup and then they slowly work their way up and through it or whatever, versus having to do what he did. And I think it gave him a broader perspective. He's able to look at teams in a different way just because of how he had to join them and work his way up through organizations and everything. And I think that's partly what he does here. Is it's given him a different kind of macro view of things, and I think that's where he's at, and that's why he feels so comfortable and confident in this group, is because he's seen lots of different teams at lots of different levels of this sport, and I think he's just comfortable in calling it as he sees it, and he sees this as a team that is capable of doing a lot, and was able to show up this year, and he thought was able to show up the year before had things allowed them to. Whether it was getting to know each other more, do more team building exercise, just have an extra week of training camp. Who even knows what that would have done for the squad? So I just think a lot of it has to do with him just being a special person who's been able to take a lot of the experiences he's gone through, as well as just the inherent personality he had. But I really trust him and his perspective when he does talk about things like that, because he is someone who's seen a lot more than a lot of other players, certainly players his age, have. And I think that's important to listen to them then when they say stuff like that.
He knows what he's talking about, and it made me think too, listening to the whole media availability, man, this guy's going to be a really good coach one day if he wants to be.
Yeah.
If that's kind of the avenue he chooses to go, like I think he'd be a fantastic coach.
Yeah.
Lots of career left, still before we talk about that, but just a thought I had on Yanni Gourde. So on to Matty Beniers, and I've been looking forward to this one.
Yep.
Because he had lots of great things to say, and I just love the personality with Matty.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't hold back. He'll tell you what's on his mind, and it's different than other young guys who I think have been kind of coached out of a lot of that stuff.
Right.
With like the media training and whatnot. But he's still got a great personality, and he wasn't shy about it, and what we were maybe thinking might be the case. And this is the kind of thing I could see some players maybe wanting to hide a little bit. But Matty didn't, and I respect him for it. I think he was tired.
Yeah.
Like after this grind of a season. And he flat out said, like, I'm ready for rest. I'm ready for the off season. I'm ready for summer. Mm-hmm. He made that clear. And I think we kind of suspected that a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you certainly did, from kind of being in the room in Game 5 and Game 7 of that Dallas series as it was getting to those more grueling times. I suspected a little bit too, and just kind of watching his play and everything. But he was not shy about how much of a grind it was. He said the most games he'd played in a season before was like 50 something. Yeah. And usually it was like 30 something. Yeah. And all of a sudden he plays 94 games this year. And he was asked, like, did it feel like 94? And he said, yes. Yeah, it did. And so you could tell it just kind of wore on him. And not just that, but I think, it's being in a different city, being away from, kind of home for that long. I think it just has a little bit of a different feel to it. And he talked about how he's eager to get home, eager to, go on the boat and kind of relax, back in Massachusetts. And I think, maybe there's a little bit of homesickness there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's just something that, a young player is going to go through on a grind of a season like that, and something that we probably could have predicted at the start of the season, because a lot of young players go through that. And so I think it's been kind of this process for Matty, and I like and respect that he, wasn't shy about talking about it.
Right. Yeah. I was just looking it up. The most games he would have played in a single season before would have been in 2019-20, and it would have been 50 games. And that's like 2 different leagues worth of games put together. And that was 60,
totally different.
That's what I meant, 60. But still, that's 60, and that's at junior level U18 stuff. Like, it's not the NHL physicality and then 14 games of playoff physicality on top of it. But that's what I think was so important about them going and lasting as long as they did in the postseason, was that it was important for the group to come together and bond the way that they did, for everybody to understand everybody's strengths and weaknesses in Game 7 situations when everything's on the line, when your back's up against the wall, who comes through in certain situations, who maybe needs a little bit of extra help in other certain situations, who is able to deal with the physicality, who isn't, how do they like to deal with that physicality, right? Are they someone who's going to go out of their way to make the hit? Are they going to be someone that's going to wait for a perfect moment and then just level somebody, right? Like, everybody plays differently in the playoffs, and I think it was important for the group to learn that about each other, but I really think it was important for the young guys, and for especially Matty Beniers, just to understand what it is. He has a frame of reference for this now that can never be taken away from him. It's something that he will always be able to better prepare for. It's just like with him getting that 10 games in last year. And I said how important that was, not so much for him to, the game is going to slow down or anything for him the following season. No, it's just to understand the routine of what it is to be a professional. And how to show up for practice every day, how to be there for morning skate, how to operate as a professional hockey player within the organization, around the people that, the training staff, all of that kind of stuff, how important all that was. I think it's the same thing with this playoffs. Now he understands and has a frame of reference for how to be as a professional NHLer come playoff time, and what it's going to take from an effort standpoint, what it's going to take from a rest and recovery standpoint, what it's going to take from just an internal motivational standpoint to get your body and mind ready into a place where not only you're going to go out there and let it get beat up, but you're also going to have to perform, and you're going to have to mentally execute and not make mistakes. And I think that that's just a really difficult thing, and it's just something that no matter how many veteran leaders you have on your team, until you go through it, you're not going to know what the best process for you is going to be. And now he had 2 full rounds to go through it, 2 7-game series to go through that and learn that about himself, and it's only going to make the entire Kraken team and organization better next year because of it.
Yeah, and I think he's already started to think about next season and kind of how to be better suited for that, in a better position for it. And one of the things he did talk about was putting on weight. And
Yeah,
we know that's kind of been a struggle this season. I think he actually lost weight over the course of this season, and he did say
definitely
he
did.
felt a little bit, in the playoffs. And he said, I'd love to put on more weight over the off season. More weight is always good. Kind of helping guys, get guys off your back in the corners and things like that. You added, if he can add some muscle to his legs as well, maybe go faster. It's definitely something he's looking to do. He did say it is a bit of a struggle for him, though. As it probably would make sense that it is, given his metabolism, given his age and everything. I think one of the reporters joked with him, like, well, hey, if you need to gain weight, come see me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he jokes about it with his parents, actually. He said they'll say, I eat a bowl of ice cream, I gain 10 pounds, you eat it, you lose weight, what's gives with all of that. But it is a struggle, but I know that he's going to be working on that and trying to kind of bulk up for next season, because I think he does realize that it's necessary.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be necessary, especially with, the fact that this team is going to be playing playoff hockey again next year, most likely, right? They're going to be fighting for that. Not only that, they're going to not want to be a wild card team. So they're going to be pushing even more during the regular season. So it's important stuff. It's, that's just the struggle of young players. I mean, it's just the way it is. We'll be talking about it with Shane Wright probably next year too.
Oh yeah.
It's the way it is. So
for sure.
Yeah. Good stuff though.
So couple more things on Matty Beniers. First off, he's got great perspective too, because he had a question about, what's it like living the dream, playing in the NHL after a year. And he said, it's great. You get to play hockey and make money doing it. You get paid to do it. So
imagine that.
I know. So he's definitely realizes how fortunate he is. And then finally, got the question in from Allison, asked, who's the Mario Kart champ at the end of the season? Matty says it's him. So unsurprising. And we know he was gaining on Morgan Geekie, from the numbers, but he says it's him. Unfortunately, we got Matty after we got Geekie, so I couldn't go back to him and be like, all right, is that legit? So if I somehow see Morgan Geekie around, maybe at a T-Birds game or something, I will ask him. But as far as Matty says, it's him.
I was gonna say, just hang out at a local Pizza Hut long enough, you're bound to see him.
There you go.
But yeah, that's what I clued in on. Was you said that he said it was him, so I believe that though. I think he was gaining traction, and that's what you want to do. If you want to be a leader on a team, go be named captain next off season. You gotta be king of the hill somewhere, and Mario Kart's the place to as good a place as any.
Yep, got to command that respect in the room, outside the room, with some Mario Kart victories. So those are kind of my takeaways from the exit interviews today. Great day. The players are always, they're always awesome with this kind of stuff. Stick around for all the questions we wanted to ask, and PR, as always, does a great job. And want to give a big thank you to them. We're going to get Dave Hackstall and Ron Francis tomorrow. So that'll be very interesting. Going to ask them some questions kind of more on the bigger picture stuff, the roster management stuff, the coaching stuff, all of that. And so we'll have part 2 of this for you after that with some takeaways from them.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be good. And we'll talk about not just their takeaways, but also kind of some of the off-season questions that everybody's been having that we've been having to put off while the Kraken have been in the playoffs. We can start addressing those and start giving some ideas about them all. So it's going to be a big one. This one's already long enough, though. Going to go ahead and end it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Shout out to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring Deep Dive, as always, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons: Absurdly Sane, Alex, Andrew, Anonymous, Ben, Burnt Creme, Kaylin, Chris, Cody, Connor, Coop, Daryl, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Eli, Elizabeth, Evan, Habak, Gaby, Gary, Gregory, Jay, Jane, Jeremy, Jessica, Joni, Joshua, Keegan, Kepler, Kitty B. Kraken,
Leanne, Light, Lonnie, Mark, Maya, Michelle, Noah, Nunya, Paige, Paul, Rebecca, Sarah, Scott, C.A. Kraken, Sean B., Sean O., Sergey, Shoeshine, Skeletal Tendency, Steve, Steven, Striatic, Pasty Kobold, Team YMIAT, Tank Commander Ty, Wendy, Strife, and Zane. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.